Alright, so for the next test, we're going to test the snake is 3 feet or so from your feet. For my case, that's about 42 inches. I've replaced the 22 rimfire target because I had 2 different kind of ammunition on that to start with. So let's see how this works. So this is a Winchester. Very light pattern, but it's bigger. I'll show that to you in a minute. Here's CCI. All right, let's zoom in on that and talk about that result a little bit. All right, so start with Winchester. All right, so you can see those tiny little number 11s. Made a much bigger. This is a 4.5 inch at least, pushing, yeah, 4.5 by about 4. Here's what the other pattern was. It was only that big. So your pattern has expanded by at least 50%, and you're starting to see some major gaps, although, yeah, not terribly bad pattern, I suppose. Your CCI pattern down here is a little bit smaller-ish, not terribly so. Plastic on the outside here. One of the pieces of plastic didn't even penetrate the cardboard. So here's your pattern here. So you don't get quite the devastation, but it is opening up by a factor of at least 50%. Hi again, this is Ron, Cold Warrior 78. I got a couple questions the other day about snake shot or rat shot, which is something a lot of people don't talk about, which is kind of funny because years ago, if you saw a guy carrying a gun in the woods, it's like, hey man, what are you carrying a gun for? Oh, snakes. Now, I can honestly say that since I have been living on this property, I've never shot a snake here on this property. I almost shot a couple while I was getting used to what snakes were out here. But never had to do that since I've been here. Now, I have shot snakes in other places, mostly because I was going to eat them back in the day. Don't do that anymore, but rattlesnake is kind of tasty. Anyway, the questions really were around how effective is snake shot, or sometimes called rat shot. So before we get into any of the details, let me zoom in on the tabletop I have here, and we'll talk about exactly what snake shot we're talking about. So stand by. All right, so here are the cartridges that we're going to talk about today. These two are 22 caliber. This is a Winchester. It's a crimped cartridge, very like a brass version of a shotgun shell. That's the old way of doing things. Since then, CCI has put out a whole line, as you see on the rest of these, come back here, of 22, 38, that's 45 Colt. And if you can see here, I get it in a picture, so you've got a plastic, make sure that's in focus there. So you have a plastic tip that contains shot, and then the rest of the cartridge here with a little bit of propellant in it. Not a lot. These things don't go that fast. The two 22s use number 11 shot, and then the 38 and the 45 Colt both use number 9 shot, so dramatically bigger. You can see a little bit better here with the 38. You can almost see bigger pellets in there. I don't know how well the camera's capturing that, but it's a bigger cartridge, bigger payload, I guess I should say. All right, so it doesn't want to stay there. And the 45, again, oops, back up here, same thing. The idea with these, I don't know if you can see the kind of starburst pattern here on the front end, is that this thing kind of pops open and the shot comes out easily. We're going to test how effective that is. Stand by. These are obviously all revolver rounds, so today we're going to test them out of a Smith & Wesson 22 with a 4-inch barrel, my Ruger 357 with a 6-inch barrel, and a Colt clone 45 Colt with about a 5-inch barrel. I chose those because A, it's what I had, B, they're pretty common for the type that you would use it for. So let's stand by, we'll talk about the procedure we're going to use here. Alright, so procedurally, you can see I have 3 pieces of cardboard here labeled 22 long rifle, 38 special, 45 Colt. I have measured my, stand by. Okay, so you saw the 3 pieces of cardboard behind me. I have measured the average distance which I have seen people shoot or attempt to shoot snakes at. The first of which is about 3 feet away from your foot on that angle. When I measured that, for me, that's 42 inches from my hand to that point on the ground. The other thing that I've seen people try to do is, oh my God, I'm stepping on a snake, and then try to instinctively shoot down at their foot to hit the snake. That distance for me is about 32 inches. I just got to tell you right up front, if you're stepping on a snake, get off the snake. Don't try to instinct shoot something you're standing on. The chance of you putting a round into your foot, I would think, is rather substantial. And then one of the things I want to see if I've got time to test today is what kind of spread do you have on these pellets, because if you do shoot one of these things right parallel to your leg about that far away, I think you have a really good chance of some of these pellets encountering your leg or your foot through your boot. But we'll see that in a minute. So what I'm going to do is start at a distance of approximately 30 inches, which would be me shooting directly down at something that I'm standing on. And we'll see those are probably going to be very, very small patterns. That's why I have fairly small pieces of cardboard. And then we'll replace those with bigger pieces of cardboard as I move back. All right, so stand by. All right, we're going to shoot the 22 rimfire. First, the Winchester. Yeah, that's a tiny pattern. And next, the CCI. All right, let's take a close-up of this. So first, the Winchester. All right, here's your pattern. That's about 2.5 inches in diameter. You can see that you've got a ring around the outside and some pellets kind of randomly dispersed on the inside. One of my concerns in testing this is that you're going to get what we call the donut of death. And that's because as your rifling spirals these things out, that they make a nice donut, but you wind up losing on the pattern on the inside. Now let's look at the CCI. All right, a lot more damage. What is that? Oh, that's a piece of the plastic. That's also a piece of the plastic. So the pattern is a slightly bit smaller, looks a little bit denser, and it obviously blew out the center of the hole. So if you absolutely had to shoot down at your foot, a 22 might not be such a bad idea, although I'm still not a real fan of that concept. Stand by. All right, next up is 38 Special, again from a distance of approximately 30 inches. Well, that was rather dramatic. All right, we can see that obviously the hole was blown right through the center of this. These are plastic pieces on the far outside. So they've buried themselves in the cardboard, but I wouldn't consider that killing shot. But again, your pattern right in here is 2.5-ish inches, 2 3/4. So really wouldn't want to shoot that at my foot, but certainly would dispatch the target with a little bit more authority than the 22 would. So interesting. Obviously not getting a problem with the donut of death. So let's check out how the 45 goes. All right, and the last one is 45 Colt from approximately 30 inches. Yeah, that was dramatic. Stand by a minute here. All right, that was a bit more dramatic. The whole, your pattern has grown to 3, almost 4 inches vertically. The plastic blew right through the cardboard. Obviously all of the shot blew through the cardboard. I'm going to have to retape the target for the next test, but a lot more power in that one. So obviously these things aren't being driven by just the primer. There's obviously some powder in that. All right, so stand by as we go next. All right, so for the next test, we're going to test the snake is 3 feet or so from your feet. For my case, that's about 42 inches. I've replaced the 22 rimfire target because I had 2 different kind of ammunition on that to start with. So let's see how this works. So this is a Winchester. Very light pattern, but it's bigger. I'll show that to you in a minute. Here's CCI. All right, let's zoom in on that and talk about that result a little bit. All right, so start with Winchester. All right, so you can see those tiny little number 11s. Made a much bigger. This is a 4.5 inch at least, pushing, yeah, 4.5 by about 4. Here's what the other pattern was. It was only that big. So your pattern has expanded by at least 50%, and you're starting to see some major gaps, although, yeah, not terribly bad pattern, I suppose. Your CCI pattern down here is a little bit smaller-ish, not terribly so. Plastic on the outside here. One of the pieces of plastic didn't even penetrate the cardboard. So here's your pattern here. So you don't get quite the devastation, but it is opening up by a factor of at least 50%. Yeah, probably still fatal. We'll see if we can test that in a little bit. Stand by. All right, our next target is going to be 38 Special CCI shot shells from about 42 inches, which is effectively 3 feet from my foot. Not bad. Zoom in just a little bit more. All right, so again, here's your pattern at the top. So your pattern has increased by, again, about 50%. Plastic shards out here. What I was mentioned before about the potential donut of death, because these are rifled barrels, these things are spinning as they go down. I was concerned you were going to lose pattern density here in the middle, but not particularly worried about it. I mean, there's nothing in there that a snake's head could hide from. So at 42 inches, yep, still certainly viable. All right, and our last target here is the 45 Colt CCI shot shell from approximately 42 inches. Which represents about 3 feet from your foot. Well, my foot anyway. Wow, that was dramatic. Yeah, let's zoom in a little bit maybe. I don't want to move, don't want to lose a pattern in here. All right, so this was a dramatic difference. Now you still have pattern density down in here. These are all pieces of the plastic, I would assume. But your pattern is that big, so almost 100% increase in the size of your pattern. Yeah, you're not losing density enough that a snake's head wouldn't get a couple of pellets in it. But yeah, depending on where the snake's head was in there, yeah, might actually need a second shot. That's intriguing. I did not expect that. Alrighty, let's wrap this up. All right, here's another shot of the weapons that we used and the ammunition. Again, from your left, that's the Smith & Wesson. It's a 4-inch 22. Used to call it a kit gun. Then the middle, the Ruger 357 6-inch barrel, and then finally the European American Arms Bounty Hunter in 45 Colt, and well, you can see the cartridges that they're using next to them, small, medium, and large if you like. But let's go over the results because that's really the important thing. All right, so just to conclude, so here we have the 22 rimfire, 22 long rifles, Winchester and CCI at 30 inches. I've circled the outer ring of where the shot hit. Here's the 42, again Winchester and CCI, using my well-calibrated pen here. So you can see, again, about a 50% increase. About a 50% increase. But not bad. I was actually kind of surprised about this. So stand by and we'll talk about the 38 Special and the 45. All right, so once again, this is 38 Special, 30 inches, 42 inches. Again, using the calibrated pen. Depending on how you measure it, maybe 50-ish% larger. The circle, by the way, goes in the outer holes that the shot put in, not the plastic on the outside. 45 Colt starts bigger, even at 30 inches, than the 38 did. And its pattern increased dramatically, almost a factor of 2. So not 50% bigger, but almost double. And yet, you know, snake is a lot larger than this pen is, but I would say there's nowhere in here that a snake's head could be that it wouldn't get some shot. So, interesting results. I didn't expect the 45 to spin out that large, particularly since the 357 barrel is an inch longer. So that's intriguing. Alrighty, so we are back in the house now. I've had a chance to take a look at each of the patterns and actually measure them with my fancy Hornady calipers. And here's what the specific numbers are for those of you who really love the crunch numbers. On the 30-inch 22 long rifle, the Winchester, 2 inches tall by 1.65 wide. The CCI, 1.91 tall by 2.18 wide. On a practical standpoint, you can cover both of those with a 16-ounce bottle of water. At the 42-inch distance, the Winchester was 3.23 wide, 2.97 wide, 3.23 tall. Again, just a little bit bigger than a 16-ounce water bottle. Your CCI, 2.99 wide, 3.11 tall. Again, a little bit bigger than your 16-ounce water bottle. As you come over to your 38 Special, zoom in on those guys, that's a little bit easier to see them. There we go, come up just a little bit. Right there. Alright, so your 38 Special, 2.43 tall, 2.38 wide. Again, that's 16-ounce water bottle size. At 42 inches, 3.29 tall, 3.74 wide, and that's because there was one in here that I didn't see when I was in the field. Makes it a little bit wider. And then for the 45 Colt, you're talking 2.92 tall inches, 2.99 wide. Again, that's bigger than a 16-ounce water bottle, but not by much. And then for your 42 inch out of the 45 Colt, 5.23 tall and 5.27 wide. And just to give you an idea how big that is, that's the can of mink oil that I use to take care of my boots. So if you're familiar with that, it's almost 50% wider than that is. Okay? So for those of you who wanted the specific numbers, there you go. Let me wrap this up for you. Stand by. Alright, so what did we learn today? Well, the revolver shot shells that are available almost exclusively from CCI, except for the Winchester crimped in 22s, seem to work fairly well. Your patterns are not terribly dense, but there's no big holes in them. And even at the 42-inch distance, now remember that was from my hand to the ground. If you've got a 6-inch barrel revolver in there, that's obviously a little bit closer than that. But regardless, at 3 foot from your foot, which is how I came up with that 42-inch measurement, the 38 was still very tight. Your 45 Colt was starting to spread out more, which I was kind of surprised about. I wouldn't want to shoot that too much farther. Even with number 9 pellets, your density and the pattern is starting to expand. They're starting to get small holes, and I think if you go much farther than that, you're going to have an issue. Surprisingly enough, the 38 shot shell out of that longer barrel, because the Ruger had a 6-inch barrel on it, still a fairly dense pattern. You could probably push that a little bit farther. But the bottom line is these things are not shotguns. They're not designed for any kind of distance. This is an up close and personal, oh my God, I got to shoot that thing. Now that being said, what are we talking about shooting? It's called a rat shot for a reason. Shoot rats, preferably in the head. Snake shot, shoot snakes in the head. I would not shoot anything the size of a possum or a raccoon with this stuff. It's not going to penetrate that much. In fact, the 22 with the Winchester, I tried to shoot one of my chickens in the head the other day, and I was about 30 inches away, so, you know, the smaller pattern, and it didn't kill the chicken like that, like I expected it was going to. He went through way more flopping around than he should have. That was that was a bad one on me. So once you get a strength, a sizable skull group together, and the chicken is not terribly strong, you're not going to penetrate enough to actually kill the thing. So other than up close and personal, you're really talking about having to use a solid bullet of some sort. Your standard 22 lead bullet, whether it's a hollow point, whether it's a 36 or a 40 grain or whatever. 38s, obviously you're into regular pistol ammunition. 45, same thing. But at close range, these things are remarkably effective. And the big thing I was concerned about is there's no donut of death. You don't have the rifling spinning that shot out and around the outside, leaving big old holes in the pattern on the inside. Patterns, at least at those distances, are adequate. So I hope this covered it. If you've got any questions, let me know. So this is Ron from Cold Warrior 78 saying get back out in the woods. And if you need to worry about snakes, okay, here's an option. One more thing I want to add. I have seen online, although I've never actually seen it in my hand, 9mm and 45 ACP versions of the CCI shot shells. Again, no direct experience with it. I haven't shot it myself. But if the results from the revolvers are anything to speak of, they're not going to cycle your gun. Meaning if you could walk around with a 9mm or a 45 and the first round is a shot shell, yes, it will shoot. It will probably have very, very similar results to what we have here, but it's not powerful enough to cycle your gun. There's not enough energy in that because the mass going out the front end is not nearly as big. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I know that the 22s do not cycle my 22 semi-automatic, either the rifle or the pistol. So those are options. You know, people ask me all the time, why are revolvers still being carried all the time? Well, shot shells are just one of many reasons why. Revolvers are not prone to giving you trouble with different bullet weights, different velocities, magnums, you know, just over a squib load target kind of thing. The power level going out the front doesn't matter because you pull the hammer back or pull the trigger, cylinder rotates to the next cylinder and bang, it goes off. Semi-automatics, on the other hand, can be much more pissy when it comes to the energy involved in the slide and everything. So anyway, I just want to let you know that. So this is Ron from Cold Warrior 78 saying get back out in the woods. Have a good time. Bye-bye.